Jenny Critchlow.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to your Monday podcast with me, Jenny Critchlow. We left last week deciding to have a look at what we fear to do. So if we fear to do things we thought we might like to try, or things we might like to accomplish, or people we might like to approach, or relationships we might like to get into, and we don't, because what we perceive is stopping us is fear. Have you had a look at that this week? You know, we talk about that point in the future that I call when I, that we tend to live in. So most of us humans, we live in the past, as in we pull stories from the past and contaminate our rather nice now moments with how wronged we were, or what so-and-so said, or what happened in our childhood. And we also live in the future, two ways in the future. One, we tend to live in a future moment where we think that there will be something better than this moment now. And that future is often about 6 months away, because 6 months means we don't quite have to do anything about it now, but it's close enough for us to be quite excited about what might happen in 6 months. Those are quite normal things, and I call the point when I earn, when I have, when I weigh, when I own, those kind of things, when I'm promoted. And we also live in a when he or she apologizes, when he or she realizes how much they've hurt me, when he or she finally asks this. Whatever it is, we often live in a future moment that's fictional in our heads, that at some point we will have or do or get the thing that we think is going to make us feel better than we do now. And so we touched on that last week with trying to move on from fear, or moving on from fear rather than trying to move on. Let's make that nice and definite. Moving on from fear and understanding that when moment, the when I bungee jump, when I travel on my own, when I brave this, that, or the other, only ever happens when you decide to brave it. And we've been looking and wondering this week, what is it for you? What is it? What are the surface things, if you like? You don't even have to go that deep, that you put off and put off and put off through fear. Fear of what may happen, what you may lose. And believe somewhere deep down that one day you will do it. And often the cure for that, if you like, or the moving on from fear is looking again at what you think will change. Do we think that as we get older, it gets easier? I'm not convinced that it does. You know, when I was a child, maybe the same for you, I assumed that adults were fine, because adults sort of seemed fine. I didn't get that they had a rich internal life just as I did as a child. And I thought that when I was a grown-up, friendships would be easy, or going places would be easy, or doing things would be easy because I was a grown-up. And then I spent my 20s waiting to be a grown-up, and that didn't happen either. So I had to go. Well, this happened actually when I was about 24, I think. And I was having New Year at a friend's. It was just the three of us, and I'd had a relationship breakup, so a bit broken-hearted and wallowing. And I decided I was going to spend the next year single, and I was going to do all the things I was scared of doing. I'd read a book called Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav, and I think it was that book anyway, where it said about being in love with someone when we're unconscious. That being in love with somebody was really the completion of self. In other words, we tended to fall in love with people who completed the things in us that we were afraid to do or have or say or go for ourselves. And that was really new to me. I was young and coming out of this relationship. And I looked and thought, well, yeah, I can see that on so many levels. I want someone to go and do weekend courses with, and I didn't really want to go and do that on my own. Or really, if I was honest, I really wanted to meet someone who lived in a tree, because I really quite fancied living in a tree, but I was too scared to go and live in a tree, and I didn't know. I knew people that sort of lived in trees or lived in interesting ways, but didn't quite know how to infiltrate that, and realised that, yeah, really I was hunting for someone that would do all these things for me that I was quite scared to do for myself. So I wrote a list of things. Weirdly, didn't include living in a tree. And I have never lived in a tree. So maybe I'm thinking central heating and some kind of cooking implement that didn't sway in the breeze may have been more important. I might have to go and analyse that one this week. Anyway, I made a list of the things I was scared to do. And I agreed that I was going to be single for this year and go off and do the things I was scared to do. One of them was go and do one weekend course or something like that, but on my own in a town I'd never been to, something. And the next year, when I opened that piece of paper I'd made my list on, most of the things I'd written down made me laugh because I'd gone and done them and forgotten what it felt like to be frightened of doing them, and had gone so much further than any of those little things I'd written down were going to take me. You know, do a weekend course. Okay, we'll go away for a week on my own. And that didn't even touch the sides. So I decided to go and do the things that were so frightening. And they weren't frightening. There were challenges, absolutely, but they weren't frightening. And the same with the project I talked about last week that I did last Friday, sitting on my own in the middle of a busy shopping mall, meditating with a sign inviting people to come and sit with me. And every time I really went into the details of that, I had a little jump of fear. That was about it. I was tense for the morning. But the moment I'd set everything out, I was in the mall, set everything out, put my little signs up, and it was 5 to 12, and I was meant to be starting at 12, and I thought, why not start 5 minutes early? And then my head went, well, you could take some video. You know, everyone will want to see the video. And then once the video was taken, take some photos, because video moves. Other people might want still photos. And what I realised I was doing was putting off this moment where I was going to actually have to just sit and do this. And it felt like a very lonely moment. But it was 12 o'clock and I'd committed to it. And I walked over to my cushions and I sat myself down. Heart racing. Why? I don't know. The vulnerability, the exposure, the shame of it. What if no one comes and sits? And then the minute I was sat with my eyes closed, in a very familiar position to me, so I do lots of sitting meditation, it wasn't scary at all. In fact, it was lovely. It was really fascinating, really paying attention to the noises, paying attention to how the floor felt. The floor really vibrated with everyone's feet. And knowing then I just had to sit there for 2 hours, and I can do that. In fact, it's going to be really, really pleasurable. And all the fear, all the worry was nothing but a thought that I'd had in the past about a future moment. And I know I should know this, and I did know this intellectually, but still the fear was there until I was actually doing it. And the actual doing of things is never what you think it is. You can cope. At the very least, you can cope. You have, to date, 100% success rate in coping with stuff. That is why you're still here. So you can trust yourself to cope. Anything else on top of that is a bonus, and there's loads of bonuses. So I did a year of facing my fears and found it hilarious the next new year that I'd been so scared to do these little things, and I'd forgotten all about that fear. And I'd been nervous. And then in the last few minutes of doing this, about to do Sit With Me, frightened, racing heart, and actually Sit With Me was very, very pleasant. And I realised when I was doing this sitting meditation in the middle of the busy mall last Friday, that if I peeked through my eyes and saw people sitting, it was a lovely feeling. I really enjoyed that. But there was a bit of a graveyard shift between after about an hour and a half, there was about 20 minutes of really nobody, or a very dedicated friend sitting there that had spotted there was nobody. And I'd flicker through my eyes and have a look, and I would feel a bit gutted. And that again was one of those wonderful moments is, well, don't look. What I'm doing is looking for evidence that this is a success, or looking for evidence that this is a failure, and then taking that evidence and ruining my internal landscape with that evidence. Why not just shut my eyes and do what I'm really enjoying, which is sitting, being really present with what is, the noise, the vibration, the sounds, the voices, and really enjoying the power I had to decide my internal landscape by simply not looking at the external landscape for either pleasure or pain, or success or failure, or approval or disapproval. That's a big one. Or feeling vulnerable or feeling invincible. All those feelings went through those 2 hours, went through me during those 2 hours. And all those feelings will have gone through me all those years ago when I was 22, 23. I can't remember how old I was, but that year of facing those fears. And never quite meeting anybody that lived in a tree. Well, no one that I wanted to be with anybody anyway. So when we're talking about moving on from fear, I'm living proof that you still feel fear. Even 20 odd years later, there's still fear there around the vulnerability and the shame and the exposure. The difference is I know I will survive. And at the very least, I will be okay. And I still have 100% success rate in getting through difficult things. And you do too. So I'm moving on. I hope you're moving on too. And let's do that again this week. What are you afraid of? Go and do it. Might not be that painful. And you may well meet your dream person who lives in a tree, if that seems to be your thing. Other than that, you can meet anybody you like. It's been lovely chatting to you today, and have a wonderful Monday, and I'll see you next week.